So picking up from where we said earlier about truth being stranger than fiction, I thought I'd start by reading a selection of old and new work, and some of which I've never read aloud for anyone outside of my own room. So I thought I'd start with a seasonal theme, and this is summer. In the summer of no rain, the grass was dry as deep fried onions, and the rustling in the parched shrubs of our front walk gave way to a woman naked, lying on the ground, attempting to build a nest in our azalea bush. Leaves pressed against breast, the folds of her waist. I approached and she rose, a thick coating of red dirt smeared all over, except for her upper back, where she couldn't reach. Eyes darting, nonstop talk, she followed me onto the street, telling me she wasn't armed. I told her I'd call for help, then dialed 911, watched as her naked form walked across Maclay Road, stopping cars. 4 sheriff's vehicles and the paramedics arrived, and the woman flashed them and danced. The blanket I'd wrapped around her by then slipping off as she smiled and begged the young males to cuff her. A deputy told me they'd run tests to see what drugs she's ingested, tried to determine which town she was from. By evening, the neighbor behind our house came home from work to find someone had thrown a flower pot through the bedroom window, then took off clothes in their shed and poured gasoline on the pile. They figured had the person found a match, their home would have been rubble. And I wonder, was it all a ruse? The naked woman part of an ingenious diversion by a roving crime ring? But I know better. I've seen addiction up close. So I wonder what she'll think tomorrow, if she remembers any of it upon waking up with a small, strong smell of petroleum on her hands, a thick film of clay soil between her toes. The next one, again, summer, and I think you remember the heat wave of last year and probably this year too. While I went east, praise to the husband who stayed back and watered what still lived in the garden. That weekend, it registered 117 degrees on the thermometer outside the kitchen window. COVID or no, so much has lurked in a year fraught with unknowns. Maybe it was that fine line between luck or fear that kept him home, but the dry, relentless heat and still winds failed to kill all his toil. Even where the deer looked too weary to scavenge, as they sat panting under the cherry tree, no attempt to move as he neared. Tonight, as the 3/4 moon shines out our bedroom window, I'll be thankful again for the gift of him, of 45 years through the rainy and the dry seasons, all that's poured down on us again and again, threatening to do us in. I write a lot about my Eastern European Jewish roots and about growing up in the South and about children. So here are a few of those. All the things we can hold. The only thing I can touch of my grandmother's are 2 thin porcelain cups and saucers that weathered the seasick voyage that brought her to Ellis Island and through the rough seas. My mother stored them in a box in the attic during my growing up years. I couldn't ask my mother about my grandmother without her crying, so I learned to keep silent, finger the filigree on the side of the cup, the fragile flowers, the faint gold line around the rim, the English pattern's name now undecipherable. I wanted to ask, I wanted to hear my mother tell me stories with her smoky breath at night by my bed. all the things she remembered. Once in a while, there was light slipping through the cracks of her iron wall. Sometimes the glimpse of a story she'd let slip unintended. So much I could tell my mother now over the past 14 years since she's gone. How I've uncovered the attic box, peered through its contents, a near empty space, wishing I could tell her the rest of the story I found while on a ship sailing backwards in time across the sea. I've stood on the porches of those faraway towns in houses she never entered, searched the records in the village, cried with the neighbor who survived the camps, read all the letters left unopened. I will leave one of my grandmother's cups and saucers for each of my daughters. I will tell them stories about what I know, what I have learned. What I do not tell them, they can ask what I'd forgotten. No secrets, no regrets for things left unsaid. Taking all, they can carry me in their outstretched hands. When the children ask, Dishman's store set on the highway that bisected our small town. To the north was Richmond, and to the south, the bridge that crossed the Appomattox River, like the Battle of the Crater, separated the Union and Confederate soldiers. Each end of the expanse large, entrenched. Dishman's was our militarized zone, where kids of any religion and color could ride up on their bikes after school, plunk their 5 pennies on the tall counter, and walk away with 5 pieces of something, sugared jellies that stuck between our teeth, or wax lips that stained our faces, or white candy cigarettes with bright red tips. We'd hang around the side of the store pretending we were inhaling and flicking invisible ashes. Mom would yell at my older brother and me if she'd heard we'd been sighted at Dishman's, scold us for riding our bikes near the highway. But it was at Dishman's where we'd risk defiance, where I still go in my imagination. They say in the Appomattox, in those muddy waters, that the spirit of a Confederate soldier still lurks and will catch us if we cross the bridge unaware. The child in my unsettled dreams is born into the place I grew up, in the blood between North and South, between black and white water fountains and blacks in the back of the bus, and a rock that shattered our front door with a note, "Dirty Jew," rubber band around it. One day I will take my granddaughters, show them the empty lot where Dishman's once stood. We'll walk the path to the highway, then over the Appomattox Bridge I last crossed late August 1968, hurrying to catch the bus for college, suitcase banging against my leg. In my dreams, the children turn to me, ask what we have learned from it all, for them, their future, and what do I tell them? Your turn. You told me that after the rain ended, the 20-month-old screamed as you held her, as she wouldn't run outside. And you described the ache you felt as you finally layered on her sweater and hat, saw her walk away from you in her red boots. You can't yet imagine the day will come when she'll need to leave and you'll finally let her go. Take it from me, long before you're ready, that girl who could carry the entire sky by a kite string will tug your heart so fiercely, your world will shift. Hold on tight, you'll hear yourself say. But it will be your turn now to pace back and forth, You this time on the ground as it shakes beneath you. Um, some of you know that this is the 5th day of Dia de los Muertos, and there might be some celebrations you're going to after this. I wrote this as the intersection between cultures on how we commemorate those we've lost and mourn. A poet worships at the little altar. It was my first time this making terracotta figurines, the red clay caked beneath my nails, no words written down. Children around me as I fumble and speak in Spanish with a woman from Oaxaca whose coiled base supports a mini skeleton mask. So realistic it is, as if it could come alive and dance, bring forth the dead. Finally, I produced 2 offerings to this Dia de los Muertos community altar, an owl for souls to fly, and a woman with stones in her wide lap, filled with her wins and losses. I am not sure what possessed me to come, only the need to bond with others this morning, truths hiding behind shadows, the candles from my father's yahrzeit barely melted all the way down. Today, I still am amazed that after 2.5 years, I'm still writing pandemic poems, but it seems like it's just as relevant as it might have been back in 2020. And some of those are commemorating also those we've lost. On the road back toward home, there it is, perched on a gate at the crest of a hill, a small osprey, wild-eyed, its mother lying still on the road. Was she killed by a passing car, or was it an illness that caused her to fly, then fall? The young bird flies toward me, then away, as if eager for an explanation. It hears the camera's click, the soft cooing of support, hardly sustenance for this foundling seeking consolation. I hope it will seek something to eat on its own as I foolishly scatter stale potato chips from the trunk. I hope the woman at the Raptor Rescue Center I called will do as promised, come in the morning, since it is already late afternoon and she is miles away. I will leave it here, and I will dream tonight about what I could have done, what the bird will do without his mother, what any of us can do now, left struggling most days of late, as we too have been left out in the cold, in the world we hardly know. After all, I wanted to frame it in a photo that afternoon as we sat on the back deck shelling peas from the first picking, how the thunder startled us, the breeze sweeping the wind chimes into a frenzy as the long dried corn stalks danced in the backfield. And we stared in wonder after these years of waking startled in the night and the quiet way it left, like you, a blush of brilliance in the western sky. Reattached. Today, only the sounds of a harpsichord and cello, a recorder and flute trail in the air, and the blossoms seem to listen along with us on these petal-strewn paths. What I couldn't have dreamed months ago about a life we'd find, again, I revel in this. Alive yet humbled, our world opened, or just this moment. And again, I am reminded to breathe it in. This morning before coming, I'd spent time reattaching the leg, one arm, of my granddaughter's doll, weak from overloving. I threaded the elastic braid, restuffed cotton batting into the doll's core, then secured the head with a plastic cord. In so many ways, after this disjointed year and a half, I too have become disconnected, left to wonder how to thread myself back. The instruments harmonize, each playing its role, allowing for intervals of each other's sounds. Skilled musicians, they are schooled in give and take, in finding the rhythm match, the sweet melody, the thrill and the rush. How much of life is like this, how we can learn to move in and out of each moment. And I'll leave here closer to being whole, humming some long forgotten tune on the way home. So those of you know that I write a lot about war and trying to make sense of it. And the Vietnam War my husband brought home with him. So here is a set of a few poems, some of which you may have heard, and start with a pandemic one. My husband talks about COVID-19 as if he's still on patrol. Anytime going out from base camp, you take your chance with snipers. You take a risk, even all suited up with night gear, thick flak jacket and combat boots, M16 at the ready. It's hard to tell the difference between friend or foe without a scope, how they can trick you and kill you, even someone symptomless, even if you have your helmet in place. Even with masks and gloves, you take a chance with the things you can't see. All suited up, you could take a shot in the neck or an artery hit in the leg, somewhere that's vital. So you cover and lay low, even on base, where a rocket can zero in and find you. The fear of friendly fire, the wife and kids come back from the store, infect you without warning. And triage will become unreliable once overwhelmed with casualties. And again, it's a matter of luck and fate who lives or dies. Now, the helicopters are circling the perimeter of our house, and someone has to be in charge, ready to drop the red smoke grenades to mark the landing zone. And he's on duty, his restless legs once again waking us as he prepares for an enemy that refuses to show its face. And this is from a workshop I took, and I think one of the prompts was a poem by Billy Collins, where he sets up a poem which becomes the poem that's never the rest read. And I wanted to try one of my own. It's called The Introduction. I wanted to just read this poem, but I have to correct a few things. My husband says he never really climbed Marble Mountain along the DMZ. He says it was really Razorback Ridge. And he wasn't on reconnaissance in his unit. He says everybody was on reconnaissance, that he was point man, the one who knows how to read the sky to tell what direction to head and for others to follow. And he says Sergeant Hardy didn't yell, "Which of you worthless grunts can tell me what direction is north?" He said, "Which of you assholes can face Kisan?" He also told me the laundry they visited that was bombed while his friend Eddie was there to pick up his wash wasn't in Dak To, it was Vinto, and that the Agent Orange cloud fell on them like a mist, covering them. And then he kept talking and talking, and I finally put down my pen and I let him go on and on until he ran out of words. That's when I told my husband to write his own damn poem. And now there's nothing left in this that I'm confident of, but he just left to feed the parking meter. So I'll read the poem now while he's gone. Whispers. My husband has clear hearing loss in his right ear. He says it's another part of him that went missing in Vietnam, the result of a concussion from a discharging howitzer just before the end of his tour. I've never felt the shock wave from a howitzer's blast, only the crack from a front-loaded musket my high school riflery coach allowed us to shoot along the Appomattox, deep in the woods. I recall each time the barrel recoiled, the butt of the gun as it jolted my shoulder, leaving its mark. The shot as it reverberated off the hills around me. When his nightmares come, I whisper in my husband's wounded ear, hoping he can make out my words, as if the familiar sound would penetrate through enemy lines and reach him, pulling him across. And I wrote this as an elegy to a guy named Robert I met one day. Final flight. It was fall and the birch trees barely turned, and the season he always looked forward to with its slight chill in the air and the crunch of dried leaves as we follow the narrow Willamette River path, the call of the heron as it unfolded its great wings over the slough. And I remember how he'd race ahead of me, and for a moment was that tiger again, in his P-40 over China as it pitched and yawed and rolled, with his missing left leg, a metal prosthetic, leaping out of a frayed cuff, and his missing right hand hook high overhead as if he could outrun memories, and I half believed him. Thank you so much, all of you. And I'm anxious to hear Penelope and Jose. And I'll end with just the last poem that is in Before Igniting, which came out just a few weeks before we all found ourselves on Zoom with questionable things on the bottom half of our bodies. So if we have anything to be hopeful about. And by the way, for those of you in Portland, the book is, I don't know if that's in the chat, is at Broadway Books. But here's the last poem. It's called Meditation on the Oregon Coast. It starts like this, with sand and air and wind that howls like a wolf's soul breaking. And around me, the sea lays its salt at my feet as the crows dip and seem to call my name to the fish that swim upstream. On this late winter day, when everything is still, shadows turning seagrass into lush fields, I walk across praying. Thank you.